And thank you everyone for joining this IPBC session. So before we start, I just wanted to encourage everyone to use the chat to ask any questions. We will have a little bit of time by the end of the panel to answer hopefully most of these questions. So feel free to use the chat to include anything that comes to your mind. And well, welcome to this IPBC session on why and how to include blue carbon ecosystems in NDCs. Today, I'm really excited to be here. We have a great lineup of speakers to discuss why it is important to include blue carbon ecosystems in nationally determined contributions and showcase some of the existing tools for supporting governments to take incremental steps towards including these ecosystems in NDCs. We will start with some of the leading authors of the recently updated Blue Carbon and Nationally Determined Contributions Guidelines on Enhanced Action by BCI. And we will also hear some of the perspectives from country governments and organizations actively working in including these ecosystems into NDCs. And just as a little bit of background on the inclusion of these ecosystems in NDCs, so according to the report titled Coastal and Marine Ecosystems as Nature-Based Solutions in New or Updated Nationally Determined Contributions, developed by the Ocean and Climate Platform, Conservation International, IUCN, RARE, the Nature Conservancy, Wetlands International, and WWF, there is growing attention to ocean and climate strategies. Key findings from this report shows that out of 148 NDCs submitted by October 2023, more than 2/3 of these NDCs have included coastal and marine NBS. Out of these, almost half of the NDC submissions incorporated coastal and marine nature-based solutions for mitigation purposes, while about 2/3 included these ecosystems for adaptation purposes. So we're going to start with our first section. So due to this growing attention, it is essential to support countries seeking to promote and preserve the climate benefits provided by these ecosystems. And in this sense, we have a really great tool that today Jill Hamilton, a Blue Climate Strategy Director at Conservation International, and Thomas Hickey, a Coastal Wetlands Project Director at Pew, will speak about this in this report titled Blue Carbon and Nationally Determined Contributions Guidelines on Enhanced Action. So very excited to hear Jill and Tom on this document. Jill and Tom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Luz. Let me quickly pull up a few slides. And then we'll get started. So hi everyone. My name is Jill Hamilton, and I'm here today with Tom Hickey from Pew. I'm from Conservation International, and as Luz just mentioned, I'll be sharing a brief overview of some newly updated guidelines for opportunities and pathways for including blue carbon ecosystems in NDCs. This is a really timely opportunity now in the coming years as countries think more and more about how to include these habitats in both adaptation and mitigation components of their nationally determined contributions. And we're very happy to be here today, share this report, some highlights, and we will also, of course, include a link to the PDF that you can download. So I'm going to get started, and then Tom is going to also share some case studies from the report towards the end of the presentation. So first off, I just wanted to thank all of our partners that contributed to this updated document, including IPBC, UNESCO, of course, Pew, and many others. Thank you very much. This was truly a group effort. Additionally, I did want to highlight that several country partners did contribute case studies with our NGO and IGO partners. And so this document and this update does include latest lessons learned and ideas and practices that countries have been using to include blue carbon in their NDCs in the past few years. So briefly, why nationally determined contributions? Why are NDCs relevant when we're thinking about conserving and restoring blue carbon habitats? So many of you likely know this, but just to start off, NDCs can send a clear signal to the global community, including the finance community, funders, what countries want to prioritize and how they want to be achieving their climate adaptation and mitigation goal. So it can send this clear signal and attract more capacity building, finance, support, etc. NDCs also have a built-in ambition increase mechanism. So as the ambition mechanism of the Paris Agreement, there is an opportunity to continually update NDCs over time, resulting in more ambitious commitments for both conservation and restoration of these habitats. And finally, there are numerous entry points in NDCs. Commitments for blue carbon can span not only mitigation, but adaptation with connections to biodiversity protection, coastal resilience, livelihoods, and more. And finally, there are other relevant global policy processes that link really closely to NDCs, such as national biodiversity strategies and action plans. There are many linkages and opportunities to enhance synergies and collaborate across these processes for enhanced action. There are many different motivations for potentially including coastal wetlands, blue carbon habitats in NDCs. These include their high mitigation benefits, high adaptation benefits, their contributions to a sustainable blue economy. As I mentioned just previously, their important role in building coastal resilience and attracting climate finance, among others. The updated blue carbon and NDC guidelines has 5 different chapters that really go into the different key areas of considerations when including these habitats in NDCs. So the first pillar includes a readiness assessment, looking at different options for including coastal wetlands and NDCs. The second looks at opportunities and steps needed to integrate these habitats into the adaptation section. The third looks at the mitigation component and relevant targets and information needed for integration there. The fourth focuses on greenhouse gas reporting and inventories for blue carbon. And the fifth pillar of these guidelines looks at implementation and also looks to some countries and case studies on how they have been implementing blue carbon commitments. So I'm going to briefly walk through the different pillars. So pillar 1, the readiness assessment and options for including coastal wetlands and NDCs. First off, many countries will establish the broader motivation to include coastal wetlands in their NDC, whether it is for carbon sequestration, coastal resilience, or other reasons. There's also recommendations in these guidelines to conduct a readiness assessment to identify the best starting point based on data availability, based on stakeholder engagement and existing policies for the management of these habitats. There's many different entry points. Also, this is where many countries will identify opportunities based on different capacity levels and quantitative data again. And importantly, knowledge gaps are okay. There are many different entry points for including a commitment to conserve or restore coastal wetlands in your NDC, and many different levels of readiness and data that is okay. Pillar 2, adaptation. In many cases, the adaptation and resilience benefits available and provided by these habitats may exceed mitigation potential. So it's really a critical opportunity and consideration for many countries. This section could include a qualitative statement of why coastal wetlands are important and how these values will be protected. And oftentimes the adaptation target could be a first entry point for many countries looking to include these habitats. Pillar 3, mitigation. I'm really going to run through these quickly, but we will share the link to the PDF. Mitigation, there needs to be quantifiable information on a reference point. There needs to be certain timeframes, ideally shared in a mitigation target. These targets require often details on scope and coverage to understand different sectors with relevance to climate mitigation. Also will often include some sort of planning process and details on how the NDC and mitigation target was developed. And then details on assumptions and methodological approaches for estimating and accounting for greenhouse gas emissions as appropriate. Next pillar, the greenhouse gas reporting pillar. Inventories of greenhouse gas emissions are, of course, very important tools for monitoring climate mitigation policies. And countries can really look to enhance their knowledge of blue carbon habitats and integration into these components of their NDC through better mapping of their distribution of blue carbon ecosystems, and then better calculation of both the above and below ground carbon stocks using the IPCC wetland supplement. So in these guidelines, there are some suggested steps for countries considering inclusion of blue carbon habitats in their greenhouse gas reporting, including reviewing available data sets, organizing a technical working group to guide process and share knowledge and data, developing a methodology, and then continually refining and testing the approach over time. And then finally, the fifth pillar, implementation. There are, of course, many considerations for a country moving towards implementation of any target in their NDC. And some of the considerations for blue carbon include looking at regulatory alignment and updates with relevance to blue carbon in their national policy framework, cross-sectoral engagement and enhancing this collaboration, ensuring stakeholder inclusion and buy-in throughout all steps of this process, looking at financing and diverse funding sources to support this work, and then also looking at opportunities to align efforts across other policy processes and commitments like national biodiversity strategies, national adaptation or resilience planning, etc. So I'll now pass the floor to Tom to talk a little bit about the different case studies that are highlighted in these guidelines. These are 3 examples, and we have many more in the actual document. Tom, please.
Thanks, Jill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. So the 3 case studies on your screen, Belize, Costa Rica, and Seychelles, all very close to Pew's heart. These are the first 3 countries in which our coastal wetlands and coral reef project partnered. I could talk about each of these countries all day at length. We don't have time for that today. You should absolutely feel free to contact myself and Jill and others if you'd like to do that. But while each of the country projects where we work, they're distinct to support those nationally determined needs, I did want to share 3 kind of observations across these 3 countries more broadly that hopefully provide a bit of context and some food for thought for the discussion ahead. So the first is on policy making. Jill has just kind of walked us through brilliantly there the technical guidance that a variety of contributors have helped bring together. What I really like about this guidance is that while it is technical, it seeks to be very practical. I think there's a temptation sometimes with policy work to see it as a primarily political or technical exercise, and certainly for things like greenhouse gas inventories, of course that's the case. But in our experience, the policy-making process in developing these 3 NDCs was very practical. It involved people, it involved partnerships. Who holds the data? Who's engaging with local communities and users? In Seychelles, we worked extensively through our partners with local schools and even with the Institute of Seychelles Creole to designate words for seagrass because there weren't at the time. And you may say, sure, that's true of any policy, but I think it's particularly appropriate to these ecosystems because if you think about the breadth of benefits that Jill's just alluded to and the breadth of entry points for a policy standpoint, then it kind of stands to reason that you'll have a wide spectrum of values and therefore a wide spectrum of stakeholders. So not just in civil society and business, but also across government. So from our experience, the policy-making process, it was complex, and in each of these countries, we partnered to do an awful lot of outreach, but it really was essential to ensuring that as we apply this sort of technical guidance, it informs both evidence-based policies and policies that are owned by the countries that ultimately will be implemented. The second is the role of research. So in each of these 3 countries, we were a partner in supporting the development of evidence baselines, so national habitat and carbon stock assessments primarily. So that was for mangroves in Costa Rica and Belize and for seagrasses in Seychelles. And the output of those research processes, those baselines, they're essential. You need to know what's there. But actually, the output was arguably only as significant as the process. We didn't want to just produce reports that sat on the shelf. Projects actually serve two broader purposes. So, firstly, to help serve as a vehicle to engage those breadth of stakeholders I just talked about, particularly when you're talking about ground truth and remote sense maps. There's a very practical first-hand platform, in particular for policymakers there, to understand how these ecosystems are important to people, and then bringing those perspectives into the design of the policymaking process. And it also provides you, secondly, with an opportunity to help strengthen capacity. Certainly in Belize and Seychelles, when we were working with the respective universities and government departments there, it's a real opportunity to make sure that when you are working with international actors, you can help strengthen those in-country capacities also. And finally, this is not new to anyone, but each of the three countries on your screen, while they included commitments to account for blue carbon in their greenhouse gas inventories, all of the commitments were actually positioned in the adaptation section of their NDCs, recognizing mitigation co-benefits, which might sound like a subtle distinction, but it's an important one. Mitigation fluxes were not the target in and of their own right. The area-based commitments were the target. And that's partly a reflection of the fact that carbon is, well, it's seldomly the benefit, but it's also rarely the most important benefit. When we're talking about all these other values to people, shoreline defense, shoreline stabilization, 20% of the world's fisheries rely on seagrasses alone, water filtration, biodiversity, they're all critical to people. So when we're talking about these ecosystems, and particularly as we're thinking about the growing number of countries that are looking at them for their NDCs, a big takeaway from our side is you need to think very holistically about those benefits, and that's something that these three case studies, I think, do both. And that is my tip.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everyone. So that's our brief overview. As Tom mentioned, please do reach out to either of us or any of the other partners to learn more about these guidelines, or to help think through how your country might better integrate blue carbon into NDCs for various reasons. So thank you so much. I'll pass it back to you, Luz, to continue the panel.
Thank you so much, Jill and Tom, for giving these great insights and also these great case studies. Very exciting to see these. And also, Jill and Tom, if you want maybe to share through the chat the link to the guidelines or anything you want to share so everyone can access them, feel free to do so. But thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And now we will move to the section of our panel discussion. We have a great panel today. I'm very excited to hear their insights. So first, we have Sarah Wolf, Knowledge Management Associate at the NDC Partnership. We also have Peggy Nurhabni, Deputy Director for Disaster Mitigation and Climate Change Adaptation at Indonesia's Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. And last but not least, we have Sinead Nielsen, Assistant Director for Blue Carbon and International Partnerships at the Australia Government Department of Climate Change, Energy, and the Environment and Water. Sorry about that. And well, for this panel discussion, we will have 2 rounds of questions. For each round, each participant will have around 5 minutes to answer their questions. And after the first round, I will start backwards so we can have enough time to hear everyone. So I'm going to start first with Sarah. Sarah, my first question for you. I wanted to know, how has the NDC partnership specifically supported and facilitated integration of blue carbon initiatives into countries' NDCs implementation efforts? So very excited to hear you.
Thanks so much, Luz, and thanks everyone. I've actually prepared some slides to help answer this question, so just give me a moment and I'll share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So the NDC partnership consists of over 200 members, including more than 120, both developing and developed, and more than 80 institutions. And it aims to create and deliver on ambitious climate action that helps achieve the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. So governments engage with the NDC partnership by identifying their NDC implementation priorities and the type of support they need to translate them into actionable policies and programs. These needs are then circulated amongst the membership, who respond with tailored packages of expertise, technical assistance, and funding to meet countries' NDC implementation and enhancement needs. This collaborative response provides developing countries with efficient access to a wide range of resources to adapt to and mitigate climate change and to foster more equitable and sustainable development. So honing in on blue carbon, oceans and coasts specific requests from countries through the partnership, since the NDC partnership began, 25 member countries from all regions have submitted 183 requests for support related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. And this comprises 4% of all country requests for support across all thematic areas circulated through the partnership. So in total, nearly 5,000 requests. This includes requests related to protecting and restoring oceans and coastal ecosystems, covering coastal zones where sea and land processes occur, as well as using the sustainable development of the ocean as an engine for sustainable economic growth, so blue economy. Of these 183 requests, 73% came from 3 countries, Tunisia, Sao Tome and Principe, and Belize. And I have specific examples of what these requests look like here. So first, the first 2 requests here from Tunisia and Sao Tome and Principe represent the more general oceans and coasts topics coming through in requests circulated through the NDC partnership. So Tunisia has requested support to design and implement an evaluation that will inform the Coastal Protection and Development Agency's Coastal Adaptation Action Plan. They're still seeking support for this request. Sao Tome and Principe requested support to improve fisheries management in vulnerable communities by building small marinas and structures for boat moorings, and this was supported by the World Bank. Now, the second 2 examples here from Belize and Papua New Guinea represent blue carbon specific requests. So Belize requested support to enhance the capacity of the country's mangrove and seagrass ecosystems to act as a carbon sink and to strengthen adaptation and resilience benefits by expanding mangrove protection and restoration efforts. And this was partially supported by Pew and WWF together. Papua New Guinea requested support to build capacity to assess and account for the country's blue carbon sequestration potential by assessing and accounting for carbon stocks and emission factors in mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass meadows. And this was partially supported by FAO and GIZ. Thanks, Luz. Back to you for your next question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'll come back to you for the second round of questions. But now I'm going to move to Peggy. Peggy, the question we have for you today, what are the benefits from coastal wetland blue carbon ecosystems that have been characterized and quantified in your country? So the floor is yours. Thanks, Peggy.
Sorry, I have someone outside. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Liz. Can you hear me clearly? Because I'm using my...
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Yes. Thank you, Peggy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, when we are talking about blue carbon ecosystem in Indonesia, actually, first of all, we are knowing the ecosystem, mangrove, seagrass together with coral reefs. Previously, it's more focused on their benefits as nature resolution and ecosystem-based adaptation. So it's more on adaptation side, actually. So it's more on their function as home for fishes, coastal barrier, and protection, alternative livelihood through marine tourism and other marine services. So that's the first thing that we recognize the ecosystem. So I have a slide, actually. Can I share my screen?
Yes, for sure. Feel free to share.
Yeah. Okay, this is only one slide. I just want to show you all that when we are talking about blue carbon ecosystem in Indonesia, especially in our NDC, so it's more on adaptation first rather than on mitigation. Coastal ecosystem, mangrove seagrass, including the coral reef, is already part of the NDC since the first NDC a few years ago. So it's still part of the ecosystem and landscape resilience. So we are more focused on adaptation. But when we are talking about mitigation of blue carbon, it's different. We already recognize mangrove as part of our forest and other land use sector, but for seagrass, we still in the process of like measure inventory and things like that to be counted into NDC. So next year, we will have our second NDC, and we have planned to put count seagrass as part of the NDC. But that's the progress right now. So we are still in the progress of putting seagrass as part of the NDC. I hope that answer your question, Alice. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peggy. Very exciting to hear this. And I'm going to move to Shanae for the first round of questions. So Shanae, we wanted to ask you, what are the benefits from coastal wetland blue carbon ecosystems that have been characterized and quantified in your country's NDC?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And I wanted to take this question as an opportunity to describe Australia's approach to blue carbon ecosystems, and by which we consider both mitigation and adaptation potential, as well as a broader suite of core benefits. So this approach acknowledges blue carbon ecosystems for their great potential to sequester and store carbon, but also recognises that intact and healthy ecosystems lead to a range of other benefits that can help build resilience. So things that we're talking about is habitat for marine species, supporting fish stocks and food security, sustaining coastal livelihoods, filtering water into our oceans and reef systems, and also protecting, importantly, coastlines from erosion and storm surge. So with a view to conserve and restore these ecosystems, we're supporting research, capacity building, carbon and natural capital accounting, and on-ground restoration and conservation activities. So we've been active in blue carbon since about 2014, and we deliver a suite of programs that support domestic and global recognition and action on the ecosystems. So perhaps the most central piece, or where we got started, was reporting on our coastal wetlands within our greenhouse gas inventory using the IPBC 2013 wetland supplement. We've been doing that incrementally since 2017. So incrementally is key, and we've taken a stepwise approach to that. There's others in the department that can speak in more detail about how we do this, but essentially it's been implementing the guidance from the wetland supplement, starting first with mangroves and then tidal marshes, slowly moving to seagrass, and continuing to refine this as data becomes available. So we're partnering with other countries for capacity building activities and reporting. Notably, we're working with Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Indonesia. And I raise this because with our partners, we all have unique circumstances and perspectives. Essentially, with what we're doing, we're trying to strive for food security and supporting livelihoods and coastal resilience, but all the while sequestering carbon. So to continue to demonstrate the importance of blue carbon ecosystems, last year Australia developed our first ocean account, and that was part of our commitments under the High Level Ocean Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. And the ocean account aimed to quantify the value of blue carbon ecosystems in economic and physical terms. And these accounts capture information on mangroves, seagrass and salt marsh, so information about their location and condition, as well as the carbon stocks they sequester and store. And then the last criteria on that was coastal protection services provided. So these accounts will continue to develop, but just as an example of some of the information that was able to be generated from these, we were able to estimate that approximately 3,600 kilometres of Australia's coastline provides storm surge protection by salt marsh, which is benefiting 88,000 homes and over 150,000 people. So the really interesting piece that came out of that, that I find interesting at least, was that we were able to estimate that the cost to replace these services from the salt marsh with seawalls would be a cost of $41 billion. So this kind of information really helps making better decisions in how we manage and value these ecosystems and how we can consider them together with our carbon reporting. So I guess the last piece I was going to mention is the Blue Carbon Conservation, Restoration and Accounting Program. So that's one component of the broader suite of things that we're supporting, and it's the piece that's delivered by my team. So under this piece of our blue carbon activities, we're supporting on-ground projects in Australia and internationally to quantify carbon, but we're also testing the UN SEER approach and using that methodology to look at the diverse benefits at a project level, and that might include First Nations cultural services, biodiversity enhancement, fish stocks, and how that all kind of fits together in, I guess, a climate resilient situation, but also more broadly how it aligns with our NBSAPs as well. So yeah, we're trying to take that holistic picture. So I might just stop there and yeah, hand it back to you, Liz.
Thank you, Shanae. Very interesting to hear also these results on resilience. And before we go to the second round of questions, I also wanted to remind everyone, in case you have a question that you want to ask the panel, feel free to put them on the chat. We're going to have some time after the panel to discuss these questions. And okay, so I'm going to start with the second round of questions. And Shanae, I'm going to start with you first. So our second question for you, we wanted to ask if you could provide more insights into Australia's national research program on assessing coastal wetland carbon stocks, and also how this data informs policy and inventory development.
Awesome, thanks, Liz. So from what I understand, there's a number of countries that have national research programs to assess coastal wetlands and their carbon stocks to help inform policy and inventory development. So we're just one of those. So as a bit of a case study, Australia is employing academics and public sector technical experts to provide data and advice on these ecosystems, and that's going in to approve our land accounting, which is largely the forest and the coastal wetland categories. We're continuing to incorporate new data, improve spatial analysis, and apply new modelling approaches to the land sector, and doing so in line with IPBC guidance. And yeah, I think this is the underlying thing that I've said in the first part, that these are our programs and we're doing it with continuous improvement of the accounts. So since our first report, we've continued to invest in more accurate and detailed modelling of the carbon stocks in these wetlands, as well as improving particularly remotely sensed information around mangroves. So where suitable, we're also trying to make this data more publicly available and connecting the data that's being developed through multiple sources. So these improvements have provided the foundation for the government to develop methodologies around blue carbon projects and helping to provide confidence that these projects are contributing to the national mitigation targets. So in particular, we've got the Australian Carbon Credit Unit Scheme, which now has a method for blue carbon projects to earn credits, and we call those ACCUs, for the emissions stored or avoided by these projects. And these credits can be sold to the Australian government or to the private sector. And importantly, we have developed a tool that the regulator uses to facilitate consistent and verifiable implementation and reporting for each project. So that tool is called BlueCam. It was developed by a collaboration of 13 coastal wetland scientists and experts from a number of universities across Australia, and they continue to engage with the BlueCam and will continue to refine it. So the parameters can be updated and so can the underpinning data that feeds into it. So I guess taking that modelled approach is allowing a level of consistency across the emissions reported by the government, but also project proponents, and that's feeding up into our national inventory. The last piece I was going to mention is our National Environmental Science Program. So the goal of that program is to support a coordinated effort to research. I think many of us can acknowledge that there's many different groups supporting research, whether that be public, private, or the academic sector. So trying to work to have a coordinated approach to all that really awesome data that we're gathering and move that to become available to those that need it. So one example of a project is we're synthesizing 3 decades of seagrass spatial data that's been collected up in Northern Australia and trying to make that more readily available. So the effort's been there and now it's just making it accessible. So yeah, happy to share other examples, but I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sinead. This was very insightful. And I'm going to move now to Fegi. Fegi, I know you mentioned that Indonesia is working on including seagrasses on their next submission. So just wanted to ask you if you could provide more insights on what are the challenges the country is facing to quantify seagrasses ecosystems, and if you can explain a little bit more of this process of including them in your next submission.
Okay, so yeah, when we're talking about seagrass, actually, it's not that mangrove, right? Mangrove, you can see the biomass clearly, but seagrass is underwater, so it's harder to see seagrass and to map seagrass and also to measure the carbon stock on seagrass. So we are like the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries itself is the mandated as the coordinator or the national focal point for ocean climate. So we are coordinating a lot of other ministries actually around Indonesia and also researcher, so that we can develop not only the policy but also like the methodology and also the inventory for blue carbon. So our focus right now is seagrass because it's mangrove is already there, but seagrass, I think not many countries already have it, and that's also in Indonesia. Like it's like a forgotten ecosystem. So we're trying to using the IPCC guideline on wetland supplement. We're trying to have a inventory on seagrass. So we already launched our first version last month during the Archipelagic and Island State Forum in Bali. So the methodology and also the inventory and the action that we present there is our first step to include the seagrass into the NDC. So we are still using tier 1 actually. So it's a global emission factor. Maybe that's the biggest gap that we have right now. So we are trying to have a more accurate during before the submission, of course. But yeah, it's still an ongoing process. And if I may, I want to share a video. I don't know, Jill already saw this before, I think, Jill, but maybe others haven't. So I would like to share my video. I hope that can work. Okay. It's not working. Sorry. Where is it?
Not yet. We cannot hear anything.
Not here? Okay.
Not yet. Maybe
Then I will share you maybe the link later on.
yes, or if you want to try it without the presentation mode, I think we can see it right now.
Can you see it?
We can
Yeah,
see it,
it's
not hear
moving,
it.
but it doesn't have any sound. It's okay, but no sound.
Yeah, I'm sorry if the video is not playing quite well, but I will share you the link later on. But right now, we are catching the time, to put the seagrass so that if you can see the screen, that's kind of, no, that's several efforts that we are doing parallel in order to catch up for the second NDC. So there's a lot of things going on right now in Indonesia for seagrasses. For the NDC side, we have national seagrass map in the ongoing process, and then also the methodology. And for the carbon pricing itself, we are also the regulator, so we are also preparing the scheme for carbon pricing. So everything going on parallel, and at the cross-cutting issues, we also a lot of homework for regulation at the minister level or decree, and also at the DG level. So there's a lot of things going on right now. And for the challenge itself, answering your question previously, Luz, the first thing is research, of course, to support our tier 2 level for seagrass inventory, because we are still using tier 1 seagrass inventory. So that's the first challenge. And also the second one is related to the policy and regulation to support blue carbon implementation. Yeah, you see about the NDC, the methodology, and also the carbon pricing strategy itself. It needs strong policy and regulations. And last but not least is a blue carbon governance and capacity building, because we want these actions actually for seagrass is more like not only come from us, the central government, but also by building networking with the local government, local university, NGOs. So we have a lot of networks that will work together to make or to run a national network, and that will automatically support the policy. Because their research is already there, they can support data, they can support policy, and then at the end, it will help us as a national policy for blue carbon to implement the policy and also the regulation. I hope that answered your question. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks for this great presentation. And also, if you would like to share the video in the chat, I think many of us would love to see it. So feel free to share it in the chat. And I'm going to move now to Sarah, to the second round of questions for her. So Sarah, our last question for you, we wanted to ask you what have been the main support needs and gaps you have identified related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts.
Thanks so much, Luz. Thanks everyone for those fantastic answers, really interesting. So building off my first answer, from the NDC partnerships engagement in over 90 countries, we actually have a database that tracks those requests for support that have come through. And it also tracks the support that's been committed against those requests. We call this database the Nook, and members of the NDC partnership have access to this system. So that's where we track the over 5,000 individual country requests. And it allows us to identify the trends that are coming through in countries' requests for support around NDC implementation and enhancement, as well as the trends in the partner support that's being committed against those requests. So we actually produced a piece of analysis in July focusing on the trends related to requests for blue carbon, oceans, and coasts support. And these trends will be produced in an insight brief that we're working on in collaboration with Pew. It'll be published later this month. The insight brief as a knowledge product is one of many knowledge products that the NDC partnership produces based on the data on trends and support gaps in country requests. So I encourage all of you who are members of the NDC partnership to have a look at this system if you don't already have access. But right now I'll share my screen and just show you a brief snapshot of what trends are coming through. We see that, I'll just say as I share my screen now, 63% of the 183 requests related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts are still seeking support through the NDC partnership. So the data I'm about to show shows us how these support gaps break down, where the country needs are focused, where targeted support is needed to meet country needs for implementing blue carbon related priorities in their NDCs. So just give me a moment. Okay. So it's really interesting that Jill mentioned climate finance, and almost every speaker today has mentioned the heavy focus on adaptation. We see these coming through in the trends and requests for support. So figure 1 shows that we're seeing a significant need for support around policy and legislation creation and revision when it comes to these requests related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. And there's also a significant gap in support for activities related to climate finance, particularly regarding preparing bankable projects and pipelines, which are some of the most common requests for support within blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. 71% of these requests related to bankable projects and pipelines remain unsupported. So support for these requests is essential, and there's a huge opportunity for an entry point for partners to ensure the sustainability of blue carbon initiatives. Looking down now at figure 2 on the bottom left, countries can access mitigation and adaptation support from the partnership. And the requests related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts mainly focus on adaptation, as has been mentioned a few times today. So we really do see this in the data, but this is also where the largest gap in support lies. As we can see here, 67% of blue carbon, oceans, and coast related requests related to adaptation still remain unsupported. So this is 96 individual requests. So we can see that more support is needed for adaptation related requests in this area. Where requests related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts have a defined sector, we can see in figure 3 that the most common sectors have the largest support gaps. So this is fisheries, water, and related tourism. We can see here that tourism still has a 62% support gap, water related requests have a 60% support gap, and fisheries related requests have a 50% support gap. So more support is needed for blue carbon related needs in these sectors. There's much more detail about the trends in these requests alongside case studies on Costa Rica, Seychelles, and Belize provided by Pew in the insight brief I mentioned at the start. Once it's published, I'll share it with the organizers of this event so that it can be circulated to all of you in attendance today. We hope that it'll be published shortly. And you'll also be able to find it soon on the NDC Partnership website alongside other knowledge products on NDC implementation and enhancement. But I'm happy to answer any questions from participants in the data that I just went through. Thanks. Back to you, Luz.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We're very much looking forward to seeing this report. Very interesting insights. So we just have a little bit more than 5 minutes in this session. So I wanted to see if there's any questions from the audience that you want to ask directly to the panelists. So feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Either works perfect.
Luis, sorry, we have 2 questions in the Q&A box that you can maybe start addressing. Can you see them?
Okay.
Actually, I cannot see them. So if
okay.
maybe you can
Yeah,
go through them.
I can help you. Yes, sure. So the first question is if we can have more details of about how unsupported requests. So for example, here, Mario Seno asks, I'm wondering why Tunisia is unsupported. The country stakeholders couldn't find any suitable support for the readiness, or they're not eligible to support, or other reasons. And if we can just detail more on that, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm happy to answer. So it simply means that no member of the NDC partnership has responded to commit support to that request from Tunisia. So The reasons for a request being unsupported vary across countries, across contexts, across partners. So it's challenging to give one specific reason for one specific request, but I can tell you that the unsupported requests from those examples and from the trends that I shared today reflect instances where a country has expressed a need and no member of the NDC partnership has committed support to that need. So again, if you're a member of the NDC partnership and are interested in providing that support, we very much welcome that and are happy to facilitate that if you'd like to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And there is another question. I think this one more for Tom, probably if he could talk about his experience with Seychelles, or also Sarah. It's about how the Seychelles managed to integrate seagrass ecosystems in the NDCs. The question is, they mapped all of it, or they did some assumptions? If you can just explain more about that.
Sure. I mean, so very briefly, they mapped all of it. So we trialed a new approach to mapping seagrass ecosystems, which was effectively remote sensing, working with the German Aerospace Agency, but then ground truthing. Because of the impacts of COVID, the mapping actually overlapped with the submission of the NDC. So the intention was that the map would have been done prior to the submission, but that wasn't possible. So the two tracks ran concurrently, but Seychelles now has a ground truth map for sea crosses across their whole maritime estate.
Thanks, Tom. So, Luis, back to you for the moderation. We have no more questions in the Q&A, but maybe some of the participants might want to ask. And I actually see one coming through the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, I see one from Laura. So this question is for Peggy. How is the seagrass inventory constructed, and what is being improved to reach tier 2?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. We are using the IPBC guideline on wetland supplement, actually. So as you can see on the video, that we are using, we overlay the seagrass map with the, because we have a location permit for marine usage, you know. So the permit also published by our ministry, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. So we have both data, the map, and then we are develop the inventory from there, because and also the mariculture permit, because it's also from our ministry. Luckily, we have all the data needed, and then yeah, we start from there. For which to improve into tier 2. To be honest, actually, we are using tier 1 not because we don't have any research on, like, through a lot of the research is built for different purposes. Sometimes it's not very compatible, you know. The value sometimes very high, some are very low, you know. The emission factor is scattered everywhere. So after long discussion with some experts on blue carbon, we are decided that we are using the global emission factor, the T1. So but yeah, one of our major homework right now is like preparing some kind of procedures or methods that what kind of research that we need, that we can support the inventory, actually. So actually I have Novi here. He's the researcher, not me. So I'm more on the policymaker. So yeah, so we are building it together, you know, because like Novi has a lab actually for blue carbon, but the purpose of the lab is quite different from what we need sometimes. So the what we need right now is the things that are conducted in the several or certain locations that can contribute to the national inventory. So that's I think, I don't know, IPBC is a big it's a bigger corporation actually. Maybe we can work on that. You can support us also to share maybe some of the knowledge and research about Indonesia, seagrass inventory. I think that would be lovely. That's for me, Luz.
Thanks, baby. Thanks so much for this answer. I see that we're at 8 a.m. So just wanted to see if there's another question for any of the panelists, and if not, we can close the event. So let's see. Perfect. I see there's no any other question, but just wanted to thank our greatest speakers, Jill, Tom, and also Sarah, Peggy, and Shanae for joining this session. It was a very insightful knowledge session, and we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your cases and examples on the great work you're doing. So we really appreciate it. And thank you so much also, Elisabetta, for organizing this session for all of us. And also thanks to everyone that joined. I hope it was an insightful session.
Thank you, Luz, for your moderation. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And just maybe to close, so this all session has been recorded, and we have on our IPBC YouTube channel all the recordings of the sessions that are available for your colleagues if you want to rewatch them. And please feel free to send us messages in case you want to be put in contact with some of the speakers or you need any additional information on what was discussed today. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great seeing you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.